I have finished another sweater. So this episode, I'm here to give a review on the LYS Cardigan pattern by Andrea Mowry. Welcome to Show and Tell Meg. I'm Megan and I like to make things. And as you can see, I have made yet another sweater. I think this is number 38. Is that correct? You guys can let me know. I have actually had the LYS Cardigan pattern on my list to make for years. I've had the pattern in my possession for years and I've always intended to do it. I really like the lace design on the front panels, and I don't know, I just never really had any yarn that made me super excited about making it, I think is what it was. And so when I got this yarn, I immediately thought of this cardigan. Originally, I had thought of making it in a solid color. And honestly, this is pretty close to a solid color. I know that my camera is warping the colors a bit because this is actually like a pale blue, and it has blue and white in there with just a myriad of colors. And so I'm going to actually try to take it out in the sun, and I'll show you kind of a close-up so that you can see the actual coloring of this sweater, because it really grays it out when I'm sitting here with this lighting. So I don't know what's up with that. My camera doesn't like my new sewing room lighting, which is really unfortunate because I painted this whole room white for this purpose. But anyway, I am really excited about my finished product. I really like my LYS cardigan, and so I'm going to break it down, what all I did, what I thought of the pattern. So if that is something that you're interested in knowing, then stick around. Let's get going. So I officially cast this on like the third week of February, not knowing anything about any kind of knit along. And it was just the next one that was on my list. I was very excited to use this yarn. And so when I finished my crazy rainbow cardigan, this is immediately what I picked up. And interestingly, Andrea Mowry announced in that time that she was going to be hosting what she calls her March to May knit along, where you knit one of her sweaters or one of her shawls, and you have from March through May to finish it. And she did mention that you could do works in progress, that would count. So I had barely started this at all. I think I had cast on and done maybe like 4 rows of the ribbing, like really not very much, before she started the actual knit along on the 1st of March. So I was thrilled that I could knit this and have it count for something with a community. I love a knit along, you know. I'm not one who's going to join a knit along just for the sake of it. I like that it's something I wanted to make anyway. And so this just really worked out perfectly. And now I'm able to submit this as my finished knit along project. And who knows, maybe I could win something. Like, that's always a fun possibility, right? And incidentally, I did not take the entire March to May to do this. I actually finished this on April 30th as far as the knitting goes. And then I had to block it, and I had to find my Eucalyptus, and I had to get my blocking materials here. Then I had to weave in all the ends, and then I had to do the button bands, which I literally just finished an hour ago before I started filming this video, because I just needed to buckle down and get it done. That is a very interesting part of my sweater that I will talk about shortly. So first, I just want to show what my sweater looks like. So this is the LYS by Andrea Mowry. It has a high scooped neck. It is raglan sleeved. It has these really cute lace panels that make a V with these baubles down the center. And then I did these little flower buttons. I made mine kind of bracelet length sleeves, and I made mine in just this awesome crazy confetti kind of colorway yarn. So I guess I can start with the yarn. Getting this yarn is what inspired this project, to be completely honest, because I just really like this yarn. And when I put it together in my head that I could use it for this pattern, I knew it was going to be a success. This is Threads by Megan Nicole, and it's a hand-dyed yarn that I bought secondhand. And so I only had access to 3 skeins, which was exactly how much I needed. This little guy is what I have left. I used all but 8 grams of my 3 skeins of yarn. And it was one of those projects that I knew from the get-go exactly what I needed to do. Since this is a hand-dyed yarn, I wanted to make sure that the colors were distributed evenly. So this sweater is knit from the bottom up. And because of that, you actually have to knit the sleeves first. So I knitted both sleeves first. And incidentally, this happened to be with my most middle toned skein of yarn. It had kind of medium speckles to it. Nothing drastic, like there weren't any big light sections or big dark sections. Everything looked pretty even. And so when I finished the sleeves, I had about 20 grams left. This is 8 grams. So I did end up using a ball, a little bit of the sleeve ball, not a ton though, honestly. And so I kept thinking, oh, I need to make sure I reserve enough at the end for the button bands, but I didn't need to do that because these button bands are done at the same time as the body. So once I finished the sleeves, I started at the bottom ribbing and worked my way up. And those 2 skeins were a little lighter and a little darker than each other. The one that I used for the sleeves was right in the middle. I showed this in my last podcast, and so I will link that up here. It ended up working out great that I could just alternate the 2 remaining skeins for the entire body. So I would just start here, go around, do a purl row back, and then switch to the other ball of yarn. And I think it distributed the color incredibly well. I don't see any difference in the lighter or the darker skein. Like, it's just one of those things that, because of my own mistakes in previous sweaters, which you can see some of that in my all the sweaters I've ever knit videos that I've been making. I've had hand-dyed yarn kind of bite me in the butt with that before, having variation in how light and dark things are. This one, I didn't want that to happen. So I made sure to alternate, and I think it turned out great. So this sweater has this really pretty lace, and it's worked from the bottom up. So you make this V with the lace, and then you have these baubles. And I actually really enjoyed knitting this lace. It was very easy to read. I could tell where I was in the pattern pretty easily, which is always a big plus for me. I did make some minor changes just for my own fit. I made the 42-inch bust size, which is size number 4 on the pattern. And I knew that I am long in the torso, and it's from this section that I am longer than standard. She had you knit, I believe, 12 inches from the hem to the underarm. And then once you connected, you were supposed to immediately start decreasing for the raglan. And I was afraid, because I've had other sweaters that I just jumped right into decreasing when I did this, and they ended up just a little bit too tight right here. And so what I did kind of on the fly is I knitted an inch, just plain stockinette, no increases, before I started the decrease. And I don't think you can even tell, the section that would have a decrease line is in my armpit. So I don't think anybody else is ever going to know that I deviated from the pattern, but it just makes it fit me better, I think. It is a smidge wide here. And so the interesting thing, even though this is a cropped fitted cardigan, she has you just do a smaller needle size for the ribbing, switch to your regular needle size, and then go straight up. You don't do any increasing towards the bust. It's supposed to kind of give that little bit of a blousey effect. And I get that a little bit, but I don't have an incredible difference between my bust and my waist at the moment. So, it does cinch it in, but it's not anything crazy drastic. And I've never done a sweater like that. I've always tried to kind of follow some waist shaping along the waist seam lines, essentially, just to give me a little bit more of a nipped in kind of look because of the styles that I like to wear. But this one, I think, still looks perfectly fine. So even without any waist decreases or increases, whichever direction I'm going, it still worked out. So I'm really happy with the fit of this. It is just a teensy smidge loose here, but that is just me. I am narrow shouldered. And I don't know how to change that on a raglan. Like, you're already decreasing so much, and I wanted to still get the distance here from my armpit so that it wasn't too tight. So if anyone knows what you're supposed to do to decrease faster on a raglan, let me know. I haven't really done too many raglan sweaters, and this is one of the reasons because I don't really know how to adjust it for myself in the shoulders. So, let me know. Me knitting 1 inch in stockinette was a slight deviation from the pattern. I believe I even made the body just like an inch longer. And I think that the length worked out really good. It hits me pretty much like an inch below my natural waist. Like if I go, I'm a little teapot, my waistline is right here. So it's about an inch lower. And I think that worked out really well. The other deviation that I made from the pattern was not intentional. So I am one of those people who I read, this is what my pattern looks like. I read this paragraph, and if it says, follow the directions of the stitch pattern in the next paragraph, then I'll read that part. But if it doesn't mention anything in that paragraph, I just do that step before I read the next section. Should I be this way? I believe that most pattern designers would say no, but it really has not made things hard for me. So I don't know that I think this is just a stylistic difference of how people write their patterns. But I was just knitting along on the body, and I noticed all of a sudden that it said in the next paragraph, at the same time, make your buttonholes. And I hadn't been doing that. And I'm notoriously bad about grown on button bands. I had the same problem with my Rose Street cardigan that I made. It looks great, but I kept forgetting to pay attention to how long it had been since I did a buttonhole. And so I would have to like drop back and try to do it with a crochet hook, real makeshift style. And I ended up trying to do that with this one, and it just did not look good. I don't know. I couldn't quite recreate what the pattern was trying to have you do for the buttonholes. So I had some that looked nice and neat, and then others that looked like this big gaping hole in comparison. And so I was probably about to here or so, maybe around here, and I forgot to do the buttonhole again, and I just couldn't bear to drop down again and try to make a yucky looking buttonhole. So I made the decision to just not do buttonholes from that point on. So you will not actually even see any buttonholes when you look close. You can see that there was one here, and I believe that you will only notice that because I am pointing to it. I think that the yarn does an okay job of concealing my duplicate stitch there, but there's one here and one here, and they just didn't look good. So after I was done with lining my button bands and all the stuff that I usually do at the end, I just duplicate stitched over those and put my buttons where I wanted. So let me move my microphone so that I can open this sweater up and show you what I did instead. Can you hear that snap? Because I used snaps instead. So what I did instead of standard buttonholes is I still put buttons because I like the look of buttons, especially on a fitted cardigan. Like, it looks like you're supposed to have buttons, So I still put buttons, but on the back of the button, I did my usual lining of the button band, and I added clear snaps. So if you have not been around for a while, you will not know that I like to do this to all of my fitted cardigans. I like to back the button band with Petersham ribbon. So this is rayon cotton Petersham ribbon, and it works fantastic. It's nice and rigid, and I'm able to give just a really stable button band. So even when my cardigan is fitted, it doesn't look like the buttons are trying to pull out of the buttonholes like you're too big for your sweater. So I do this to every single sweater that I make. That's the style. It's just a part of the process to me. I know some people don't like to do it because it is time consuming. Between sewing the actual Petersham ribbon on both sides earlier this morning and then coming back and doing another hour to sew the snaps as well as the buttons on top, or if I'm doing it more standard style, if I've already made buttonholes in my sweater, Then I pop out the sewing machine and I make buttonholes on this ribbon before I sew it on so that they line up. Like it's quite the process. It takes several hours to do. But personally, I think it's just a really nice touch, and it makes your sweaters not only last much longer, but look much more put together when you're wearing them. So if you're interested in that, I do have a tutorial video I will link up here on how to back your button bands. I, this time, used clear snaps, and they're just directly behind my buttons. So my buttons are just little white, kind of mother of pearl plastic with a flower on them. And I thought they were really cute. And confession, I bought them on Temu. These were really inexpensive buttons, but I just thought that they looked really nice with the sweater. I think that they complemented enough, yet they have a little bit of interest, so it's not boring. Like, I don't like a boring button. I like buttons to be a part of my sweater. So I think these worked out great. And I actually have a huge bag. I think I got like 50 of these buttons. So I'm sure I will use them in the future. So my little snag with the button band was definitely not the pattern's fault. Like, it even says in capital letters. So the pattern actually has, this is what you do. You knit the ribbing. And then at the same time, bold capital letters, I'm supposed to be doing a buttonhole, and I absolutely spaced out and did not see that. So this is not Andrea Mowry's fault. This is not the fault of the pattern. This is entirely the fact that I am scatterbrained, and sometimes I just can't help myself. I just needed to knit, and so I kept on knitting, and I didn't pay attention. I was supposed to be doing buttons in the ribbing, but we got there in the end. So if you ever have this happen, here's a cheat for you. Just sew some snaps on the back. I did clear ones just because that's what I had, and this is a light color. But if this was like a darker color, gray or a black, anything like that, I would have absolutely done metal snaps because they're stronger and they last better, in my opinion. But in this case, these plastic ones are holding up great. So it came in clutch. I am very happy that I was able to make that work because I did not want to deal with those really unattractive looking buttonholes that I ended up making. But all in all, this was an extremely straightforward cardigan. And honestly, I think that this is the fastest I've ever knit a fingering weight cardigan. And grant you, it's not long sleeve, but it's pretty close. I mean, I've only got a couple of inches there that would have made it long sleeve. I don't know that I could have made it long sleeve. I might have been able to. This is only 8 grams, so I don't know if 8 grams would get me both wrists covered. And so that's why I went into this knowing I wanted to make a 3/4 length cardigan. It's what I tend to wear the most anyway, just being in Florida. Something about that last couple of inches of your wrist can be the difference between you feeling comfortable and feeling too hot in the summer here. So I am glad to have my bracelet length sleeves. And yeah, I have just this little bit left, but that's perfect. I can throw this in my scraps. I can keep it for if I ever need to fix anything about this sweater, or I can throw it in a sock. Who knows? But it really was the perfect amount. This is really a true fingering weight yarn, I would say, as far as the thickness. Maybe slightly light fingering, just because this was a 100-gram skein and it had 463 yards. So I guess that technically is a light fingering. I forgot to say that this is Threads by Megan Nicole, and this was her Monet colorway. And I think that name is really spot on. It's very impressionist kind of, because it's mostly blue, but it has those pops of green. It has pops of bright colors. There's yellow, there's pink, there's purple, there's orange. Like, there's just so many different colors in here. And so it does give that kind of gardeny effect, I think. And it looks more impressionist because it's little bits.
Do you think she's pretty? Yeah, she's a full-on Monet.
Because it's little splatter, it's not huge sections of the color, but it's just enough that honestly, it'll kind of match everything. And I had never heard of this yarn before. I bought this secondhand from someone on Ravelry quite a while ago. It was not cheap, but it was cheap for what it is. I got all 3 skeins for $20 a piece. So this did cost me $60. And then when you factor in the 50 cents I paid for these buttons, and then the Peterson ribbon, I got an entire roll of it at a thrift store for $1, I think. So everything about it was very inexpensive or secondhand. And yes, I understand that $20 a skein is not inexpensive, but when you factor in how much hand-dyed yarn typically sells for, this is usually what, 28, $35. It just depends on who it is that's dyeing it. I've never tried to buy anything from Threads by Megan Nicole before. I'd never heard of her before, but I would be interested in seeing what she dyes in the future. It is a really nice yarn. I really like the base. It is a sock yarn. So this is 75% superwash merino and 25% nylon. It really didn't grow either. Like, this is exactly what it seemed like it was going to be like when I knit it, I guess, if that makes sense. Superwash yarn can sometimes grow after you've washed and blocked it, but no, it held up great. So if I came across anything by this dyer again, I would absolutely consider buying it because I think this was a very nice result from the yarn. And even though I have known about Andrea Mowry for years, I've never knit any of her patterns because I tend to like this style of sweater. I like cropped, kind of fitted vintage style. I like, the 50s, 60s kind of look is what most of my sweaters end up being because it's just the style that I like to wear. And most of her stuff is a little more modern, kind of like looser. Some of it's oversized. I don't know. I have definitely come to grow into liking some of her designs a whole lot more than I used to. But this is the first one that ever really struck me that I'm like, yeah, I love that design. I would really like to knit it. And I'm really glad that I did. And I'm glad that I was able to do it during the knit along. It was just really fun to be in the group and see what other people were making. Even if they weren't things necessarily that I would want to wear, I don't know, I could still appreciate the thought process of everybody putting their time and effort into making these things. And so I don't know. I guess I'm just nosy and I like to see what other people are doing, but it was a fun added aspect to making this sweater that I was going to be making anyway. And so that is really kind of all I have to say about this sweater. I really like it. I think this is a great pattern. If you are at all interested in making an LYS cardigan by Andrea Mowry, I think it's totally worth the money for the pattern. It's very well written. The fit came out great. And it's got enough detailed diagrams and everything that I could tell, that I needed to add that little bit of length, things like that. I can appreciate that it gives me enough information that I can tell what kind of changes that I could make to make it fit me better. So I hope that you enjoyed this. If you liked my sweater, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear if you have knitted the LYS cardigan, if you are an Andrea Mowry fan. I'm converted. There's a few others that I really like the look of and want to make now. And I just have to kind of dig through my stash and work it up with the yarn that I have. But yeah, I don't know. I'm a fan of how they're written and I would absolutely try another one. So if you are new to her, let me know. Or if you are a long-standing fan, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your experience with her patterns as well. So that is all that I have for you today. If you like this, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to stick around. I am always sharing the things that I make. Thank you also so much for the reception that I had on my duck house making video last week. I have to admit, I was very worried that that video was just going to absolutely tank because I talk about knitting and sewing. I do not talk about ducks or woodworking. So I'm really happy that everybody liked that video. I will be back to a little more of this for now, but occasionally I may throw in another woodworking video because there are some things that I need to still make. We are back in the world of knitting at the moment. So thank you so much for watching. And until next time, I hope that all of your March to May knit along submissions turned out great and you got them done on time.